Welcome, Frederik, to the engine room. A lot of energy today, Friday, 3:21 o'clock. Last time you were here was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
4 months ago. And back then we spoke about what you would do as a new head of marketing in the first 30 days.
I think we did 90 days.
First 90 days.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to turn it around. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing the first 90 days, we're actually going to have you look back on your consulting career so far.
Yeah.
And basically take the most important aspects that you have learned throughout.
Yes.
Experiences, do's, don'ts, all of that. But basically comprising it into one singular package of this is definitely what I recommend, and this is definitely what I do not recommend.
All right.
All right?
Yeah. Let's see how this goes.
See how it goes. So to start off, obviously you've been consulting for how many years now?
I've been consulting companies since, I guess, it's 2019, right?
Okay.
So in May this year, it's going to be 6 years, right?
6 years, okay.
Yeah.
And it has primarily been B2B SaaS companies, right?
Partly, right? So for the first many years, there was a lot of talk about like product market fit. Where do I want to go? Like what companies do I want to take as clients? And for the longest time, I was like, I'll take anybody who want to pay me some money, right? That was where I was at. And at some point, a couple of years in, I kind of had to decide, right? Because people say riches are in the niches, and that's 100% right. So I think for the last 2.5 years, it's been B2B. And then for the last 2 years, it's been B2B SaaS focused a lot, right? Okay. But before that, I also had e-commerce, and I also had therapy businesses, and I had, I had B2B SaaS before, like that period. Obviously, that was what kind of sparked the interest. And I looked at myself and was like, if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? And that would be technology SaaS, because I like the innovation over there. So I have a broad experience, I would say, generally speaking, but from the last 2.5 years where things have really started to make sense and take off for me, it's been B2B SaaS.
Okay. Because that does mean that you have ample experience across different industries within marketing, right? So if we were to look at B2B SaaS specifically, what would you say that the marketing challenges have been that have surprised you the most?
I think the thing that has surprised me the most is, I think there's really two things that maybe three things that I'm very surprised about. And they all really tie back to business fundamentals, which I think is super weird, because if you're looking at a company, 200 employees, maybe, sometimes that's the case, right? Ample amounts of funding, they have gotten a lot of money, investors in the back, a lot of customers. You would expect that a company like that would know what they were doing, right? And to an extent, they probably are. But some of the things that it's very surprising to me is the lack of customer understanding. So like just can we sit down and create an ICP that we say, well, here are the companies that we want to have, and that turns out to be a very, very challenging task for a lot of companies, because they say, as I did in the start, well, anybody can basically buy our product, so anybody should. And so really niching in and saying these are our customers, and while that might be right that you are able to solve problems for a lot of different customers, there's definitely a segment or a subsegment of a niche market that you serve better. So that's number one for me, right? The opaqueness or inclarity for companies, that they don't know who they really serve, right? And where the biggest problem they face are. So that's definitely the biggest one for me. The second one for me is just the level of unclarity in data. For a long time, I trusted a lot of data generally, but as I've gotten more into B2B and more into B2B SaaS, there's I think the idea of a single source of truth is utopia. To be fair, it's a matter of making good basing good decisions on incomplete data. But that's really a big one for me, and I think a big one that a lot of people need to take in is we're never gonna have that, and we can't always find the right answer in the data. It can give indicators, but that's also it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's been a big one for me and a big mistake it's been a big surprise for me.
Yeah.
And I think the third one is just like the level of I think I'll call it level of execution. And that is actually not just marketing, that's also sales. And I think, some distinction is there's this like, some people live to work and some people work to live, right? And that work to live thing, not everybody is super passionate about what they do. I've been for a long time. And that's been surprising to me that there is not always people taking pride in their work and not always trying to be better. So that kind of, desire to continually improve and continually, do their best, that's been a surprise as well. And that would then lead into we're not always following best practices. Maybe we're just checking boxes and like going through the motions. And then like that just kind of leads to subpar execution and subpar, results, obviously. So that's just off the top of my head some of the bigger surprises that I've seen in my consulting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, talking about challenges, being the engine room and all, we also got to look at what is the potential fix.
Yeah.
So let's start with the ICP, because what I wanted to then get your opinion on was the most common marketing mistakes for SaaS companies and why they are so widespread. So let's talk about fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it is so widespread? And let's say that it is in fact a mistake, because we both believe it is.
Yeah.
And then how do you fix it?
So why is it a mistake? Why is this mistake being made so often? I think it's it's maybe a good question. Maybe it ties a little bit back to this thing of not being able to niche down, or not. Maybe you are able to, but maybe you don't have the guts to do it, because there is some guts. It takes some guts to do it, and it takes some courage to really do it. If you are, now we're looking at products, right? A lot of products can service a lot of different industries and a lot of different people. Mm-hmm. If we just take something like an example I always love to use, Asana, project management, right? Why would they want to segment down? Why would they want to say, we're just going to go after developers? I guess like Asana is used a lot by developers, right? Why would they say, I only want to target developers in whatever technology companies that are 200 employees to 500 employees they just raised their Series C or whatever? Why would they do that? Because they have a product that can spread so wide. You can plan marketing in there, you can plan hiring in there, you can do sales in there, you can do basically anything. So why would they want to do that? I think that's a fair question to ask, right? So I think that's really one, because obviously there are some some very niche like vertical SaaS, like this is the only like legal tech, for example, right? Yeah. That makes sense to only sell that to lawyers, for example, as an example, right? So why would I want to niche down when everybody can basically use my product? Yeah. So I think that's really one of the things that makes people fail at these things, because they don't dare to do that. So maybe that's why we see a mistake, right? A fix for that is fairly easy. Niche down, right?
Yeah.
And the reason you want to niche down is because it's very hard. I always say, if you want to be something for everybody, you become nothing to nobody, right? And if you go out with a message saying project management for everybody, then you're not talking to anybody specific. And whether you like it or not, people want to feel special, and people like to feel special. So if you, instead of that, go in and tailor your ICP and say, well, now we're going to focus on these people. And then I base my messaging around that. I base my segmentation around that. I base my targeting around that. I base my positioning around that. So basically everything that I do and everything that I say and everything that I communicate, my colors, my iconography, my fonts, whatever, right? It's basically tailored to these people, so they feel very seen by me. And that's why that works. That's what you call a beachhead strategy. And it's been very successfully deployed by DocuSign, right? Which is a e-signature platform. And they, everybody needs online signature, right? You don't need it, but like it makes things easier, right? Everybody could use it. But what they did is they deployed this beachhead strategy, and they said, first we need to get the lawyers, right? So they base everything around lawyers, right? And then, okay, now we have this beachhead. Who do we want to target next? I can't remember who they went after, but then they might have gone after agencies, and then they might have gone after this. So that would mean they would probably do subdomains, and then they would probably do specific campaigns. So subdomains, whatever, right? And then they would tailor their messaging to this type of ICP, and they would tailor their positioning inside of this segment to fit marketing agencies. And that's really that's why you need to do that, right? Because if you go out and communicate a very generic message and a very generic problem that everybody might recognize, it's not going to feel urgent. But if you're able to say you need project management because if you don't, like billable hours are going to go down and all this, you're missing deadlines, you're turning customers, whatever, all the things that agency owners care about, then all of a sudden you have something very relevant. So that is like, I think that went into why is it important, and then.
But then I want to challenge you. So let's bring it closer to home. If we look at our clients, right, and we're generalizing, why does it happen for our clients, and how is it we help them get out of it?
I think it happens from a lot of the clients we work with. They have got some sort of funding, usually VC, right, and they want to see 10x growth over the next year, right, or the next quarter. So if we want to hit that target, we can maybe only focus on, because then simply because of the size of the segment we're going after, we might not be able to see that growth. So that's maybe one. Another one might be that they don't necessarily know that they have product market fit somewhere. And product market fit is we've managed to sell the same solution design to the same type of company, right? So that might also make them, I don't really know. Maybe they're unsure themselves, so they might not have product market fit, or maybe they are unsure of their own product themselves, right? Are we selling products? Are we selling services, right? That could also be something. So I think that's a lot of what we see here at Sparkforce, that the companies are suffering from some of that stuff. In many cases, it's some pressure from some investment firm or some board, right?
So they come to us, and we analyze and we recognize that we need to look into the ICP. Walk us through, how do you fix that? Like, if you can't afford to hire an agency or get consultancy help, how do you fix it yourself?
So I think the first thing that I would do is I would go back to my CRM system, customer relationship management. People probably know. I would go back to my CRM, and then I would do, we call it just a revenue analysis, right? Where does my money flow the fastest? Pipeline velocity, as with actual closed numbers, not this is quite an important point, because pipeline velocity is usually a forecast metric that is used, and there's a lot of fluctuations that go into a forecast metric that's very unreliable. But if you take actual closed won revenue that you have closed won and base it on that, and do your pipeline calculations with that, with factual revenue numbers, with factual deal sizes, or quarter, either a quarter or half a year, so set date ranges, right? Either that or an actual sales cycle. You do it with actual number of deals come inbound or actual number of ops, and you do it with actual ACVs. Then you get then you're able to much more clearly say how much pipeline or how much revenue goes through my pipeline, right? So you get a pipeline velocity calculation that is based in factual, actual numbers, right? That's a big one. And then you can kind of start to split it out over these different firmographics: employee sizes, industries, geographies, growth rates, business models, you name it, right? So that's kind of my first step. That's what I'm looking to do first, because then that tells me the story of, okay, so what I'm doing right now, or what I'm closing, and I don't care about if it's inbound, outbound, partner-led, whatever. I'm just looking at this blended, right? Because I need to understand where am I closing deals and where are they closing the fastest, where are they closing the slowest. Then I'm holding that up against what am I doing, right? And what am I doing in my sales motion? What am I doing in my marketing motion to figure out if there are some discrepancies with what's going on here? Then I'm looking back into my, okay, so what I have here in my revenue analysis, does that match with I might not have a formalized ICP, but does that match with my understanding of who serves this product the best? Yeah. Because they might not be the same thing. And I might see, well, okay, it turns out that logistics companies actually want to buy my product. Yeah. And if you have a big sales team, you might not have a grasp of this as a CMO or commercial leader. You just see the deals come in and you might not actually sit down and look at the factual numbers, right? Yeah. So does that match with my understanding of my ICP? Yes, no, right? If yes, good. If no, then there's time to do some updates, right? Yeah. Product, like markets change, tendencies change, trends change, products change, companies change. So an ICP is definitely not static, right? Yeah. But that is that's where I would start, and then I would start to look at how I'm updating, right? Yeah. When I have that, and this is just like, it's the cool thing about this, I think, is that it doesn't have to be, what do you want to say? It doesn't have to be an end-all be-all answer. It's just a guiding line for what do I look for? Who do I try and go and ask? So, because that ties into what I want to say now. So I'm going to go out and see, well, there are these 20 companies that fit the bill of number of employees, industry, geography, or whatever, right? Whatever company firmographics that I decide to split this revenue on. Then I go and talk to some of them, and I want to know, why are you buying? Yeah. And so, yeah, why are you buying? What made you buy? What catalyst event did you have internally in your company that now this became relevant to you? Category entry points, right? So then I do that, have some data, get some qualitative data there. I would do the same thing for my closed losts that fit this bill, right? Yeah. Because that's also important. Why didn't you buy? Well, some of them might say, I didn't know you could do this. I thought you were not for me, right? So I went to one of the competitors that positioned and messaged better, right? Right. So that's kind of the next thing that I'm doing, and then I'm looking at the qualitative feedback that I'm getting there, yeah. And does that match with my H1 on my website? Does that match with the ads that I go into the market with, right? Yeah. And usually it doesn't.
That's the funny thing, and I have a story about that, because next up we're sort of diving into strategy and how a lot of companies have a solid strategy on paper, but it's sometimes difficult to execute, or they do execute it, but it doesn't provide the results necessary. So when I was sitting in-house and we're talking about ICP, we ended up doing the revenue analysis, and we thought we were making a lot of money selling to pharmaceutical companies. But looking at the days to close, even though the average order value was absolutely exorbitant, the days to close were 4x what it was for us selling to food and bev. Mm. And the average order value wasn't, or 4x, contract value, yeah, wasn't that much smaller. So we were like, obviously, we're going to sell to this company or to this line of companies here. But it also made it so that we had to switch the messaging and the creatives. But what happened was a lot more growth, just because it would take so long to close a deal. And when we talk about also CAC, customer acquisition, or the CAC payback period, right? Customer acquisition cost, and then how long it takes to go back. It just made the business flow way better. And I think one of those things is that it can get tricky, because you are set in your motion, you have your tactics, and then to go back to the drawing board, you almost need that catalyst event, which could be just inefficient growth, or you're maybe not hitting your targets. It could be a load of things, right?
I think there's also some pride that goes on here, right? Like personal pride, right?
Yeah.
Because if I as a commercial leader have said, we need to go, in your case, we need to go after pharmaceutical companies, right? We see huge ACVs here, right?
Yeah.
Lots of growth potential. They have a lot of money. Let's just go, right? And then some agency comes in and says, well, based on the data, you might actually be looking at, well, they in food and bev, they convert 4 times faster, and the ACV isn't 4 times higher in pharma, right? Then it maybe makes sense to go over here. And then somebody might have said, well, we haven't seen the full potential of the pharma yet, right? We're still ramping. So there's also some pride that goes into this.
Yeah, and it's also why we didn't cut out pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah.
It was just like the distribution of marketing spend was then adjusted. But I think if a company has a history of selling, let's say to pharmaceutical companies, which we did, our catalyst event was then, numbers are looking a little iffy here. And it might be pride, but it might also just be history. Either way, what we do recommend, I guess, always is might as well take a look at your ICP. It doesn't hurt. Even if you're, like, who knows what sort of data could come up, right? It doesn't require a catalyst event, would you say?
I don't think it necessarily requires a catalyst event. And I think if I like, in an ideal world, right, I'm doing a revenue analysis every quarter, right? Just to, like, make sure that I'm, just as guardrails, right?
Yeah.
I'm staying in my lane here. Because, I don't know, like, one thing is that we're doing all this marketing and we're doing, like, we're outbounding now. Instead of outbounding to pharma, we're outbounding to F&B segments, right? There's also, like, this part of just organic inbound that we might not influence, and that might be driven by word of mouth or whatever. That is really hard for us to tell. But I really want to see if I'm getting that, and all of a sudden I start to see trends going in this direction and saying, well, food and bev is still good for us, we can still do that, but all of a sudden, like, this toys manufacturers, they start to pop up over here. I wanna know that early on, right? Because then I'm doing my revenue analysis maybe as part of my QBRs, right? I'm doing my revenue analysis here, and then so in Q1 I start to see toys, like, they're 6%, and then now they're 8%. And then in Q3 they're 16%, so they doubled quarter over quarter. What's happening here? Well, it's all organic inbound, right? Then there's opportunity over here, and that's because a catalyst event happened in that industry. It might be like law, legislation, or whatever, right? That kind of all of a sudden made my product interesting to them. So that's something that I want to do, and I want to emphasize very much, like, ICP is never done, right? Because things change all the time. Yeah. And then in SaaS, for example, all of a sudden we saw this change from growth at all costs, and now we're calling it efficient growth, right? That's kind of the errors that we're seeing. And now all of a sudden AI is coming in, and business model are changing, because now we can't do seat-based. Now it has to be outcome-based, and we have to do, like, it's almost like credit-based now. You see Clay, whatever, fucking growing and insane, and they have a credit-based system, right? So business model are also changing, and that means, people need to adapt to that stuff, and that means potentially, like, our business model has to change at Sparkforce, right? Because companies are requiring new ways to deal with their agencies or whatever, right? Yeah. So that's also why the ICP is just never done, right? And same thing goes for any business fundamental, business fundamental, marketing fundamental, anything. Like, positioning is always up for adaptation. Since Mille started, our very skilled copywriter here at Sparkforce, she started in, I think, April last year, right? So she's been here for 10 months. We've managed to update our positioning, actually, our headline on the website 3 times, right? Yeah. Because that evolves all the time. Our ICP has changed, so all that it's continually evolving and moving and in motion, right? Yeah. And it's not just our company that looks like this. It's all the companies.
But not all companies are then changing it or being proactive with it. No. So I think a general rule is, if you have a QBR, then definitely marketing should just take a look, right? Run the revenue analytics. If something pops up, then at least you have the knowledge.
and final point I want to make is it's not that you're saying these programs suck, because it's not program specific.
Yeah.
It's a blended look at what is flowing through our pipeline. I don't care if it's outbound or if it's inbound or if it's organic or if it's partner or whatever, right? I don't really care. I'm just interested in seeing what trends am I seeing here. Our product is skewing towards a smaller employee count. Okay, good. I want to know that, because then I need to adapt to that. So it's not playing a blame game. It's nothing like that. It's a matter of how do we optimize for business growth, and that's why you want to keep this revenue analytics or like this ICP thing front and center. And you might not have to change it every quarter. Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But you probably have to change it every year, and maybe not a lot, but maybe a little bit. Probably a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're then talking solid strategy, because what we're sort of getting into is, if you have your fundamentals, then you have the tools to then create a solid strategy. A lot of companies will say, whether that's pride or not, based on fundamentals or not, that they have a solid strategy. Because if you didn't, it's kind of hard to go to market, right? But still, a lot of companies, and we see that, you and me and the rest of the people in here, that maybe they failed to execute it. So why do you think that is, and how is it that we at Sparkforce help them sort of get on the right track? Not saying that we're the end all to fix B2B SaaS company solutions,
but a little bit.
But we try our best, right?
Yeah.
So two-parted question here. Why do you think solid strategy doesn't always equal results? And that's a very open-ended, broad question, but I'm curious about your take.
I can answer it very simply.
Okay.
Because it's not solid strategy.
There you have it.
It's that simple, right? I think a lot of some of the strategy that I've seen, it's not really strategy, right? It's very operational and it's very tactical, right? Strategy, marketing strategy is ICP. It is segmentation. It's the STP. It's the 4Ps or 7Ps or whatever, right? I'll maybe flesh that out a little bit. STP, segmentation, targeting, positioning. 4Ps, product, pricing, placement, promotion, right? So it's all those things that kind of go into that. And a lot of marketing strategy really doesn't have that. It's much more, here's what we post on LinkedIn, right? Yeah. And that's part of the promotion part of a strategy. And that is the digital part of the promotion strategy. And there is offline and physical and whatever, right? A lot of stuff that goes into the promotion part of a marketing strategy. And what you're looking at when you're saying, we want to post 4 times to LinkedIn every month or every week, that is the digital part of the placement, of the promotion part of the marketing strategy. So it's not a lot, right?
Yeah.
So it's because it's not solid strategy. You need to consider our audience, our ICP. Yeah. Who are they? Yeah. Where do they hang out? All that stuff you need to, and then you need to tailor what you're doing onto that, right? Yeah. We don't do marketing strategies. Well, we do, but ours is very focused on demand gen and digital demand gen, right? So that's kind of where we focus in, and we are really good at what we do. Yeah. But the reason we're seeing so many companies create a strategy and then fail at it is because it's not really a strategy. Yeah. It's just we want to spend on Facebook.
Yeah. So if you were to just list it 1 through 5. Yeah. What happens when a company knocks on our door and the stages that they sort of go through, like, because we start with the fundamentals, right? Yep. And then we sort of go before we even think of spending any sort of marketing dollar.
Yes.
So without going into detail, what are the 5 or 6, 7 steps that we always do to take a company from a non-solid strategy to where we say, okay, now we're confident in the direction that we can take you?
Yeah. I think the first thing we do is we figure out why is their current setup strategy, call it what you want, not working, right? That's kind of the first thing we're looking at, because sometimes I don't recall that it's happened. It hasn't happened to me, but sometimes we see something and we actually say, this is working quite well.
Yeah.
You should just keep doing.
Yeah.
Don't hire us. You should just keep doing what you're doing, right? Sometimes we see fractions of that. We might see a Google ad setup that worked quite well, or like an organic content strategy that works quite well. But the first thing we kind of do is we figure out where's the potential for optimization, right? And the next thing we do is we spend a lot of time in a strategy session where we understand, and the most important thing for us to understand, or for me to understand at least, is like, what does the customer look like? And this becomes very full circle, right? Because what does the customer look like, aka the ICP, decision-making units inside of that, and then maybe some persona, so I can do some persona-based messaging around that, like financial buyer, economic, it's the same thing, economic buyer, emotional buyer, logical buyer, right? So I can message to that. But then, so we find what's not working right now. Then, for the strategy stuff, I want to understand very much about the customer, about the ICP, like what pains are they experiencing, right? That's really important for us to know. And then I want to understand a lot about the product, even on a feature-based level, because sometimes just messaging against features is a really good idea.
Yeah.
So I really want to understand that. And then I want to understand the category and the market, right? So the category, because I have a theory, I don't think it's so much a theory as experience-based at the moment, that people buy categories before they buy anything else, right? So they see they have a problem internally. If we go back to the Asana example, we are missing deadlines, right? We have tasks and they don't get allocated to the right people. We need a project management tool. That's the category. Yeah. Project management, right? So that's what I'm buying first. And then I go in to look at features, and then I might decide on Asana because that's the brand that I know, right? Yeah. So that's really the most important stuff, to really get a good grasp of that. If we can't get a good grasp of that with the clients and with the sales team, with the CS team, we want to do customer interviews. It's that simple, and we facilitate that, right? Yeah. And then what else? Then we go into so here's the strategy. We figure out what should the ICP look like, and based on the information we have about your customers and all that, what do we think is the right move for you to do? And here it becomes important. ACV becomes important, right? Sales cycle lengths become important. Are we selling to micro segments, or are we selling to enterprise, right? That becomes important because usually when you're selling enterprise deals, and we're looking at, if we want to sell to companies that have a billion plus turnover revenue, it's not just two people making a decision, right? Usually, it might be if you're selling something to $9 a month, but when you want to sell to that, you want to go all the way up there, and you're trying to sell 500K ACV products, then it's not just two people calling the shots, right? You have 20 people in the buying group that is going to influence this deal, right? Then something like Google search probably becomes deprioritized, because that's a very direct response channel. And for somebody, I call them category buyers, that are people who, they're just looking to buy this category and they might not really have a preferred vendor that they want to buy for, Google search is a good call. So I'm not saying that shouldn't be part of it. It definitely should. In most cases, it should. But then something like building demand in the market for this product and this brand in particular, that becomes way more important, because we have 20 people to influence. And a gated ebook and a Google search ad is not going to influence all 20 people, right? It's just going to have somebody, usually not a CFO who is potentially like this final decision maker, hidden buyer, gatekeeper person. They're not the ones who click that ad, right? It's somebody in the research mode, and then it becomes very small in the grand scheme of things that we got a Google click. So then we're looking much more into something like a demand gen play, and so we figure all that stuff out, and based on that, and that is based on it's part science and it's part art, I would call it. So science is the numbers, how can we make them work, what's CAC payback period, as you said, what's allowable CACs and all that stuff. And then it goes into the art, which is the experience. We've seen this before. We know this industry. We've tried to sell to CFOs before. Then we go into that. And then how do we then take all this knowledge that we have and translate it into actions that we need to take? right? And then it becomes relevant. How often, maybe not relevant, but like as an example, how often do we post to LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it matters much if you post 3 or 4 times looking at that. But what actions do we then want to take that's going to drive this desired outcome? Yeah. So that's how you turn strategy, because all this information you have up here, into something concrete, right?
Yeah. You mentioned something about Google clicks. And I think, having been there myself, a lot of marketing people and salespeople, we drown in metrics. And for us here at Sparkforce, we're pretty clear cut on what the end goal is.
Yes.
That's revenue, closed won deals. So if we just were to sort of go across the board for our clients, we track top 3 metrics. What are the top 3 that marketing and sales teams should just be laser focused on?
Yeah.
Closed won revenue, obviously.
Yeah.
But what about the next 2?
Okay. I actually divide this up. So I'm going to give you 9 metrics.
Okay.
But because I divide it up in 3 different layers of tracking, right? So we have what I call business metrics. Then we have what I call CRM metrics. And then I have what we call platform metrics, right? So the business metrics. That's CAC paybacks, close won revenue, and I would say sales cycle links maybe, right? That's probably some of the most interesting stuff there. Let's see. Let me think it through just to be sure that I give you the right ones, right? I think CAC paybacks are important. Obviously, CAC is a little bit in there as well, right? CAC payback period, close won revenue, I think is an important one. And you know what? I think, I think sales cycle links goes in there as well. Then we have CRM metrics, which is, I think that is what that's inbound deals, that's inbound to meeting, and that's inbound to closed won, I think, that ratio. So inbound to meeting ratio, how many of the inbounds that come in turn into meetings, or maybe ops or meetings, right? So opportunities or meetings, depending on how you really...
Yeah, I think that's a good one, because what I've seen is that a lot of inbounds don't necessarily turn to meetings because either you're too slow to take action, you don't have an automated routing tool, and you can't afford to lose that.
No. And the reason I'm a little bit in between if it should be meetings or ops is because there's some different definitions out there. Yeah. But what I want to understand is how many of the inbounds that are coming in through the website, how well are they progressing, right? Yeah. So inbound to op or inbound to meeting sat, and then if I can take one more, meeting sat to closed won, and then lead to closed won. So I want to get those ratios to understand how well is my mid-funnel, if you will, right? Yeah. Converting, really. Yeah. And then in terms of platform metrics, I'm a big demand gen guy, so I'm much more interested in seeing view-through conversions on something like LinkedIn, right? So people who've seen my stuff and then gone to the website afterwards to convert. Click conversions can be gamed, I think, because we would just send people to the right pages. Something's going to convert, right? Yeah. Due to fat fingers sometimes. So I want to see view-through conversions, then I want to see click-through rate as a proxy for messaging, and then I want to see engagement rate also as a proxy for messaging. Yeah. So, and what I mean by that is, when I'm putting out messaging to my audience in there, I think a really good measure for how well is this resonating and am I hitting the right people is something like click-through rates and engagement rates. LinkedIn is, rolling out, or they have done that, something called dwell time, which I think is also a decent proxy for this. Yeah. So I'm really trying to divide it out in the 3 layers, because they all 3 have different time spans, right? So the CAC payback, we're going to see that further down the road, and we can really do obviously it's good to have that, and it's good to have that as a not a leading indicator, but like a North Star, like a leading star that we want to see. This is what we're going after. Here's the allowable CAC payback period that we'll have, but it's not something we can use in marketing to optimize against, right? And I think it's important, especially with now everything going on. We need to optimize for revenue, and we need to do all that stuff, and that's all good and fine. But if we are back into the example that I had before, we had 20 stakeholders, 20 people in the buying group. We can't use close-won revenue as a way to optimize what we're doing on the platform, right? So that's fine, and it's good as a mindset that we want to optimize towards revenue, and it's fine that we try and track it because we can, and we can send offline conversions back and all that stuff. So that's perfectly fine that we want to do that. But as a way to look at in the more shorter term, are we putting the right message in front of the right people? I think platform metrics, that's where they become important.
Yeah.
Not that we want to report on it, but it's something that us marketers need to understand the correlations between, these things, and then optimize towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that happen a lot is that sales and marketing, they tend to fight with each other. And us as consultants, we can sit there and we can be like, oh dear, you shouldn't, because you have the same goal, right? But I think we can break it up. And I talked to, when Christian was on, who's now a commercial lead, we talked about what can marketing actually influence, right? And at the end of the day, we can make it real simple, and I'm overgeneralizing now, but our job as marketeers, whether we are in-house or consultants, is to generate awareness for the ICP and the buying committee to get shortlisted as a solution. Yeah. That's all we can ever do when we hope for is to get shortlisted, right? Now, that's sort of pre-deal. When the deal comes in, that's where you maybe have product marketing or you have whatever marketing people that will then try and see how can we support sales. That might be certain documents, it might be, whatever. That's sort of what marketing can do, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a little, that's a lot. But still, sales team will often complain. And it's maybe not so much about how deals progress and what marketing do there. It's more about what happens on the pre-phase, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, we're not getting enough inbounds. We're getting the wrong kind of inbounds. And you and me, we have opinions on lead generation, which used to be, the play. And what we are facilitating is a lot more demand generation towards a specific ICP with specific messaging. Same sort of goes for account-based marketing. But now, you as a consultant, and we've had cases, you and me, where sales and marketing, they fight. How do we get them to work together instead of fighting over pipeline and lead quality? And let's make it simple, because it should be simple.
Yeah. I think one thing that I want to say before I go into that, you said that marketing, what we really only can do is generate awareness and then become shortlisted. And I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Because I think a good and a fun mind frame to have fun. We're not all in a position to have fun, but a fun mind frame to have around marketing is that revenue and inbound leads are a byproduct of good marketing, right? So should marketing be measured? Should they own a number? Should they own a revenue number? I'm not sure that they necessarily should own a revenue number because there's a lot that's left up to potentially bad salespeople that then is marketing. Will they make marketing look bad? They might get a lot of good leads, but the sales are slow. I've worked with a case, and we could see that we generated a lot of good leads because we could see it it's a type of company where you kind of have to submit a message, right, in the form. And we can just see the message would increasingly get better and better and better. There's no doubt about it. The amount of information they left in that message, really good. Yeah. But we're still closing like so small numbers, right? And then we learned that because of the salespeople, they're used to network selling, and in network selling, they were, they could easily come back to a new potential client 5 days after. But when you're not selling to people you you can't afford that, especially not in a very competitive market as they are in, right? There are a lot of suppliers, so they can't afford to spend 5 days. So that also meant that marketing wouldn't hit their revenue number because the salespeople took 5 days in order to get in touch with the lead, and by that they already signed a deal somewhere else, right? It's that how fast it went. Yeah. Okay, so that was just on that. How can sales and marketing create more alignment? That's what you're asking me, right?
In the simplest terms.
Yeah.
Because I know I asked you the question, but I have a very simple view of it.
Okay.
Right? Which is that you align on ICP and messaging, because it should be the same sales trolls and then in marketing material. Maybe you define a list of accounts if you want to do.
I don't think you should say maybe you define a list of accounts. You absolutely define a list of accounts together. If you are in the ABM.
If you are in the ABM, and if you're doing demand gen, then maybe then you have your persona and sort of your verticals, and then you go through there. But you have that, right? So let's take the ABM case. You have a list of accounts you've agreed upon, the people within the buying committee you want to hit. All right. You do the marketing, right? You produce the material, you show the content, you show that to sales too. They know exactly what is being shown. And while you are doing this, you're monitoring engagement from the accounts to your ads, to your website, through various tools that do this. Sales then also monitor these tools. So while they're maybe picking up the phone, they're emailing, they're also making notice of accounts to sort of, engage, right? And then they start prospecting into the buying committee through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And that way you sort of join in on the same goal, which is these accounts we know will potentially lead to revenue, and we attack them simultaneously. So it's not like marketing advertises to 100 accounts that sales have never heard of. I think that is the dream scenario where both teams come together.
Yes.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a story about a client that I used to work with, and how we did that, a lot of that, and why it didn't work.
Go for it.
Or how it didn't work more. So we did that. We brought sales in. We brought the sales leader in, actually, and I showed him the revenue analysis, right? He was like, sure, I can understand that. We define that as a technology company. Sure, fine. Definitions, right? No worries. So we agreed on an ICP. Very nice. Then we got into, okay, now let's figure out the target account lists. Okay, we brought him in, sent it for revision with sales. Okay, we disagreed a little bit, made some adaptations. Sales made some more adaptations, and we got a list. Really nice. Okay, went into promoted it, sent it on LinkedIn, push, what I would say was okay messaging, right? That had, the person we're working with, she was sitting in sales meetings, right? So she would also get some input from there. We would push that out, and then we would tell them, here are some high engagement accounts. Can you maybe reach out to them? And here's what they did. So we're also talking enterprise here, right? So it was an ABM motion. We're talking enterprise, potentially like 5,000 plus employees, right? So here's what the sales team would do. They'll be like, nice. This account is very active on our ads, and we see them on our website. Okay. Then they would send one email, and then they would come back to marketing and say, that was a dud. And then that would move into closed loss, and they would never think about it again. Yeah. So, I mean, and that was kind of the formula that you just gave us, right? So I think part of getting alignment is also partly, there's part actions, right? We need to do this and we need to collaborate on it, but sales also needs to see the lights, right? And I think marketing is now, so we've been in the lead gen era, and now we're in the dark social demand gen era, if we want to use some, some buzzwords around it. And marketers, I wouldn't say on a broader scale, but like, are moving towards this. They see this. Yeah. I still do think that sales are in a marketing is a support function mindset. Yeah. We have a lot of clients where this is not the case, where sales is really like they want to pitch in here, but they're used to getting served, and that marketing is like, you just do sales collateral, you do sales enablement stuff for me, and all that stuff. So there's just such a big change management change management exercise that goes into getting something like this to work. Because obviously, when you're reaching out to a 5,000 person plus company, and you're sending one email to, who do you even send it to? It could be to the receptionist, right? Yeah. And they don't get back to you. you haven't done your prospecting, right? So that's a matter of also saying, and I think this comes back to compensation structures. Basically, there's not a willingness to high five because who sourced the lead, right?
Yeah.
So we need to get out of that mindset, and we need to celebrate and high five as a revenue team whenever we do something that's very well. And we need to high five when we open all bound deals, as we call them here, all bound, right? Doesn't matter if it's inbound or outbound. We just celebrate because these are our shared target accounts. And then we also need to high five and celebrate whenever we close one. And we shouldn't have, attribution games and all that stuff. So I think, while I do think the recipe you showed here is like good on a tactical level and on a like action-based level, there's also just a matter of like pure philosophy.
Yeah.
And that might take a couple of years because,
it will.
Are we in a kind of change a little bit where we see, native digitals taking more and more leadership roles, and then it's going to slowly change. But I do still think there's some ways to go. Some people are ready to, when they see the light, they're ready to change. But I also just think marketing is still considered a sales support function, and that's a problem.
That's true, and that's also when the episode, which will be out when this goes live, with the episode with Christian, who is of course the commercial lead. He's got both the experience from sales and marketing, and we talked about sales marketing alignment. And ultimately, we also ended up saying that yes, the incentive structure and how that works, and how marketing, because we've had to adapt due to being a support function, and marketing for many is just a pure survival game. Obviously, sales is the same, and some will argue it's even more so. But I think I agree with you, there is change management that is needed, and that's also why for marketing departments, they really just have to sort of step up and try and educate to the best of their abilities. Responsibility lies for sales as well, but it comes from the top, and that's ultimately what Christian also said, right?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, because that's what I tried to do when I was sitting in-house. I tried to educate. I was the managing manager, and I was like, I need help from you guys from sales, right? But when it comes from the adjacent person in marketing and not necessarily from the top, it falls to sort of deaf ears.
Yeah.
And I think that's also where, as a marketing person, you just have to be aware of your limitations, right? There's only so much you can do, and don't like overcomplicate it, because at the end of the day, you cannot. Some can move mountains, but us mortals will do our best, right?
Yeah.
And we can have the best practices here, but ultimately, that's the limitation. And I think for us as consultants, what we can do is basically the same thing. We can help the in-house marketing person. We can try and give them the right tools. We do communicate with sales, but whether they get it or not is really a question of where are they in their sales journey.
Yeah.
As a company.
I think adding to that, this whole discussion kind of goes back to my learning, or number 3, right?
Yeah. Work
to live to work. Because some people, as I said, they're passionate, right?
Yeah.
In Danish, we call them ildsjæle, right?
Yeah.
So like they're really passionate, right? You're one, I'm one.
Mm.
You come into a company and you're like, I want to make this bitch grow, right?
Yeah.
I need to grow this. And that's a very selfless way to approach a task, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you do a good job, you're getting your promotion, you're getting your salary increase, you're getting your, sometimes, right? Yeah. In the best cases, right? Mm. And you're getting all that, so you're increasing, and you're also, it's also, if you have that in you, like long term is also good for my career, because what I did was this, right? And then you can kind of go into that. Not everybody has that. Somebody, and I'm not putting, just for the record, right? Mm. It's not better than the other. It's perfectly fine to, work to live, and you have your hobbies, and that's perfectly fine. But it's just not as ingrained here, right? Mm. So let's take a salesperson who is kind of, I'm just doing my job, right? And they get their compensation, and like they get their OTE earnings, and like whatever, right? OTE earnings, you can't really say that. OTEs, right? And they are not interested in collaborating, because why? If I'm sourcing this deal and I can mark it as outbound and it closes, I'm getting my bonus, right? It goes into my payment structure. Okay, maybe even half of your salary is based on, whatever you source yourself, right? Then why would I want to collaborate with marketing? I care that this is outbound marked and not all bound. I care because half of my salary is about this. Yeah. So, and that goes back to the incentive structures, right? So it is, it's not as simple as just saying, here's the target account list and here's the shared actions that we'll do, because not everybody has that, I want to grow this company, because not everybody hinges their personality on what they do at work, right? Yeah. I do, and that's fine. Not everybody does. Somebody hinges at how well they perform at soccer or football or whatever, right? Yeah. And that's perfectly fine. So I just think that's also when we are trying to do our best in terms of growing a client company, that's also just some of the roadblocks that we run into. And it's not wrong. It's not right either. It just is.
It is what it is, right? And I think this is where, when we talk about marketing strategy that is based on the proper fundamentals, basically everything is set up as how we would want it, which sort of ties back into what you spoke about earlier, right? All the different steps that you go through, you have everything set up, and it just doesn't go as you planned it. Maybe due to that sales marketing collaboration. What is there to do when, from your side as a marketing person, you've got everything. You've got your revenue analytics, it's the right ICP, it's the messaging, but deals are not picked up fast enough. You don't want to complain about sales or to sales, right? But you see that deals are not going through the pipe either. You are maybe measured on closed won revenue. What do you do? Besides quitting.
I'm not a quitter.
How do you fix that?
I think the answer differs if you're a consultant or if you're an in-house employee, right?
Let's take it from the in-house's perspective.
I never really sat in-house, but
with your consulting experience,
here's what I would do, right? I would, let's say I'm not a CMO, right? Let's say I don't think it really matters. I'm getting FaceTime with the CEO, and then I'm saying, here is what's going on right now. I'm backing this with data, right? So you can see my lead speed to lead. It's like this. So as you can see here, I'm generating, and I present to him, do you agree that this is our ICP? Yeah, okay. Do you agree that this is who we want to sell to? Okay, good. Do we agree that these X amount of inbounds that's come in lately, they fit this bill? Yes, okay. Here's what I need you to see. We're generating these. Our speed to lead, which is, how long time does it take before they come inbound until we book a meeting with them? If you don't have like a calendar booking system or whatever, right? How long time does it take until we have like the next steps planned, or like we have a touch from our SDR or AE or whatever, right? How long time does that take? Well, it takes 14 days. Can you understand why it's hard for me to be measured on revenue then? Yeah, I would expect so. So okay. So what I'm suggesting here is that you take a talk with sales, and then you create a framework or a foundation for them to get in touch with these people earlier. Here's my suggestion. Could be fucking Calendly, right? Let's get Calendly so people can book, and then set up round robin. It costs $19 a month. So we can set up round robin, and our SDRs is just booked. Then maybe we can start to talk about that. In the meantime, I would like that my performance were based on this. And then as we start to see the speed to lead increase, and we start to see all these numbers increase, I'm happy to go back into being measured on revenue. But right now, there's so much that's out of my hands that I don't think it's fair that my job all of a sudden becomes on the line here, and that my ass is getting handed to me at board meetings because I'm not hitting my revenue numbers, while sales might be in President's Club or whatever, right? Not too big of a deal. So maybe it's taking that constructive route and saying, I'm able to influence up until this point. I need your help to keep influencing. I'm happy to be measured on revenue, but maybe let's give it 9 months, and then like so you're being rational about it, right? And if your CEO then says no, you can fuck off, then I would quit. I think that's how I would approach it. And it's the same thing we're trying to do as consultants, right? So we always tell clients, say, we want to be measured on close won revenue, but we need to mature into it, right? I think that's how I would go about it.
Yeah. Okay. Which is
now I'm going to ask you: is that a good or a bad way based on your in-house experience?
It's a good approach.
Does it work in the real world?
It can.
Okay.
It can. It's a good approach in the sense that obviously you gotta back it up with data and not just gut feeling. No matter how frustrated you are, it's the right call, no doubt about it. I think more often than not, the outcome is not what you'd expect. You may be measured differently, but then you may be sitting with a case of now you're measured on the quantity of inbounds, which is arguably better than revenue, depending on what sort of market you're in. If it's enterprise,
that's a tough one.
That's a tough one, right?
I think, but that's also knowing your ICP, right?
Yes.
Because then I want to be measured on weighted pipeline.
Yes.
Because then I can say, well, our salespeople are closing inbound to closed won at 3%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means $1 million. There's a deal of 100,000 that comes in. My 3% is 3,000. Okay, I need to generate whatever in this quarter, and then that's what I'm doing. So it also, like, adapting metrics to motions is quite important.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. I think the last thing that I want to sort of end on is, because it's been a very comprehensive discussion, this one, right? And we started off with the biggest mistakes or challenges that you've seen. Challenges, that was it. We just talked about mistakes as well. The biggest challenges, and and I think you mentioned 3. So let's end off with your top 3 best things to do that are not specifically related to like the challenges. So just, what are your go-tos as a marketing consultant for any of these like organizations that we work with?
What outcome am I optimizing for?
You're optimizing for revenue.
Okay. Okay. In no particular order. I think there is an order here. I'm getting my ICP done. I'm spending time on my ICP.
Yeah.
Right? And inside of my ICP, whatever, if that's wrong or right, inside of my ICP, I need to look at messaging. That's my big one, right?
We can throw in April Dunford as a great person to get inspired by when it comes to not only ICP but also messaging.
Yeah, and positioning with her as well, right? Yeah. So that's probably my number one. And then I think my second thing, I just need to get something out there, right?
Yeah. So don't be too harsh on your creatives.
Nope. I'm always like this. I always think like this. I'm a target group of 1, right? I can't tell if this creative is good or not, right? I don't know. I don't know if this messaging is good or not. I need to give it to the market. And if my market then tells me this fucking sucks, then I need to go back. Yeah. But it might be that we're targeting at a very boring audience and they don't like anything fun. Maybe. And they just want the bland, whatever, right? It resonates with them. It just doesn't with me. Then let's just get something out there and then learn, right? And then I think my final thing is I think I would keep revenue in mind. I think I want to keep the story centered around revenue, but then I also want to make sure that I kind of draw the map over there and kind of build the map towards there, right? So I'm telling a story of like, here's where we're trying to go. We need to generate revenue. There's no doubt about it. Looking at historical data, we see sales cycles of a year, right? So I'm not able to go in and create deals, close deals, and like generate revenue in the first month. But what I am able to is I'm able to create positive signals and leading indicators, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to say. And then I want to say, now I'm seeing positive signals and leading indicators. That's really, really good. The next thing that I want to see is this. And then the next thing I want to see is this. And now we have sales opportunities going on over here. And then they are turning into revenue, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really my whatever suggestions, or like how to, if I'm optimizing for revenue, I'm just starting out from nothing, then that's really my 3 things, right? I don't wanna be one of those that comes in and say, now we need to sit back and analyze for 90 days. Because we also need to show some momentum. And I think marketing is very much about actions and about momentum. Yeah. And building that early is a good idea. So I'm like, if that means that I have to work super hard for 14 days or 20 days, 21 days to get that ICP done, then I'm doing that. Yeah. And then I'm ready to launch something. Yeah. Right?
I think the only thing I'd add is to be very, very thorough and thoughtful when it comes to what type of creatives are you making. We got to remember that most people nowadays do not want to talk to sales. And it's a general message, I think, to marketing people, is what I tell a lot of our clients, is that when we think about creatives, right, let's think about how would you want to buy yourself. If somebody calls you, most likely you hang up. If you see an ad, you scroll, right? What do you need to know? Yeah. You need, in most instances, educational content where a real person, not AI, tells you about a product offering, right? Yeah. If you produce an ad and you don't think that you would buy, or even like not necessarily buy, because we're talking many touch points, but you don't think that ad is anything special, then you can that ad. Or you put it out there because obviously we're a little biased ourselves, right? Yeah. You put it out there, you try and test it, but I think be very mindful of the educational aspect. What is it you're trying to solve? How is it you're solving it? And why should anyone care? Yeah. If you answer those 3 questions in any ad, I think you're good to go.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm echoing what you're saying. I agree. In terms of design and in terms of all that stuff, I don't care too much.
Me neither.
I could send out a white ad with a white background with my logo on it, and then just have some bold text in there that says, are you also tired of missing deadlines and in turn having clients churn? Yeah, okay. I have a tool you need to try. Okay, interesting, right? And if that resonates with developers and whatever, then they might look at Asana next, right? Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you.
Be bold.
Yeah, be bold.
That's the final message. Thank you for participating, Frederik.
Thank you.